New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell announces Anne Kirkpatrick as her pick to lead the New Orleans Police Department.
Former colleagues of Kirkpatrick tout her work as a law enforcement official, but at least one New Orleans City Council member has lingering concerns. Maddie Kurth joins us now with more.
Well, Lee and Lauren, the city got its first chance to hear directly from Anne Kirkpatrick today, signaling the beginning of the end of a nationwide search to replace Superintendent Sean Ferguson, who retired last December. But we don't have a new chief just yet. Cantrell's choice of Kirkpatrick still must be confirmed by a vote from the city council.
I am more proud than ever to become a New Orleans police officer.
New Orleans was introduced Monday to the police veteran whom Mayor Cantrell wants to lead the NOPD. Anne Kirkpatrick, the former police chief of Oakland, California, brings more than 35 years of law enforcement experience outside of Louisiana.
I will set out on day one to earn your respect.
Cantrell's choice of Kirkpatrick over two other finalists surprised many who believed the mayor wanted to keep interim superintendent Michelle Woodfork in the chief's office.
Nothing against Michelle Woodfork, but these are very trying times for the people of New Orleans, for the police department, and someone who's been a chief in Anne's case more than once is likely the best choice.
Ronald Surpass served as the head of the NOPD from 2010 to 2014. He's a professor at Loyola now, but prior to his tenure as superintendent, he ran in the same circles as Kirkpatrick. Surpass was the chief of the Washington State Patrol. Kirkpatrick was the chief of police in Federal Way, Washington, a suburb of Seattle.
And if someone is going to stand up and say what they think is the right thing based on the information they have, you should always be willing to do that.
Kirkpatrick will need at least 4 votes from the New Orleans City Council members to be confirmed for the job. Councilmember Freddie King says his office already has been fielding calls about the announcement.
So just shocked. I received a lot of calls, emails from constituents voicing their concerns. And
one of those concerns being that Kirkpatrick is new to the city.
From what I've been hearing, a move like this would not be beneficial to the morale of the officers and the morale of the people in the city who feel like things are going in the right direction.
King said he also has reservations and says the process of selecting a police chief needs to change.
The decision for the police chief should be put more in the hands of the residents of the city.
But Kirkpatrick says she has a plan to earn the trust from the city, NOPD officers, and from the council.
I do not take the process lightly nor for granted. I shall come, likewise, prepared to be transparent and with a plan for the future.
Mayor Cantrell says a driving factor in her nomination of Kirkpatrick was her experience policing under a federal consent decree in Oakland. Tonight at 10, we are going to hear Kirkpatrick's plan to bring the NOPD into compliance and reduce crime in New Orleans.